she gave me her phone number, and I called her, and I just called her just before she was headed out the door to work. She worked night shift at the time. It was, it was getting to be around 9 or 10 o'clock then. And she said, "It's very nice to hear from me." She said, "I'll tell you what, come on up next weekend, I'll cook you dinner and we can talk." I said, "Okay." So I went to Alexandria, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. That's where she was living at the time. And had dinner, and I found out she had become Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And she had received dawah from a lot of Afghani cab drivers.
Mm-hmm.
This time period occurred after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and a lot of people fled over here.
Mm-hmm.
And because of language barrier or for other reasons unknown to me, driving a cab was basically the only occupation a lot of them could get.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually pretty good money. And a lot of them were making a pretty decent living and pretty honest living. Matter of fact, they were probably the most honest cab drivers you ever seen, and really some of the nicest people I'd ever met in my life. And they gave her dawah, and she basically had the same feelings I had. She never really felt the Catholic Church was the correct way to go either.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a lot of missing pieces in the puzzle, so she became Muslim. So she gave me a lot of pamphlets, some small booklets, books and stuff like that to read. At this point, I have not even seen a Quran.
Mm-hmm.
Never seen one. I just took these pamphlets, went home, and I studied these pamphlets for about maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months.
Just pamphlets?
Just pamphlets and little informative booklets like on Salah, who are the Muslims, stuff like that. Most of these publications were actually put out by the Islamic Center of Washington, D.C. on Massachusetts Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
They had a really nice selection of different pamphlets. And I even had, I think it was volume 9 of Al-Bukhari Hadith.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who's just trying to soak in all this, it's all of a sudden try to read Hadith without any prerequisites was like saying, okay, I don't quite understand this, but maybe if I keep flipping through, something will make some sense.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, after several months, all of a sudden I started looking at my puzzle again. Mm-hmm. That had half the wrong pieces there. I'm like, okay, well, I know this piece does not belong here, so we put it over here. And from these information packages, I'm like, okay, here's a piece of puzzle right here that it fits.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm exchanging the wrong pieces for pieces over here I'm finding, and finally I've got my puzzle put together.
And this is puzzle you have laid out in front of you from when you were 9 years old?
Right, at least starting from 9 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
So finally all the pieces fit.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of stuff starts making sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a young child, even during my atheist time of my life,
mm-hmm.
I acknowledged that Jesus existed,
mm-hmm.
because I also studied Roman history. And according to what the Romans believe, okay, they believe that they executed a man named Jesus who was causing trouble in one of their provinces.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, historically, the man existed, no question.
Mm-hmm.
Any historian will tell you, yes, that man existed, and a person named at least Jesus, known by Jesus by the Greeks after
mm-hmm.
translation. But I just didn't know what his status was at that time. Yeah. Like I was saying, that I acknowledged Jesus as a living person, but didn't know how to fit this person in to what I was being taught that didn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when I found out through Islam that Jesus was one of the 25 prophets mentioned by name in the Quran,
mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, okay, well, this makes more sense. I got a living man who I know existed,
mm-hmm.
that no way in the world could have been Son of God or God incarnate, because it doesn't make any sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not put himself in a position to be mortal, to be killed. That would destroy, you follow what I'm saying? That
mm-hmm.
didn't make any sense to me. But it made sense that the man was a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even if you look in the Christian Bible, the New Testament, in the form it's in now, what was Jesus doing?
Mm-hmm.
He was preaching and talking about God Almighty,
mm-hmm.
which is what a prophet does.
Right.
So like I said, these pictures, everything started falling in place. So when I finally got my piece of the puzzle all put together, I called what would be my future first wife, and told her, I think I'm this all of a sudden. I mean, well, I'm going to back up just a little bit as I'm putting these pieces together. Even though they made sense, I started getting a little aggressive with questions I was asking her over the telephone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say, well, what about this here? That doesn't make sense. Then she would, like, try to make sense of it. And then she said, look, I said, if you want to be argumentative, I can't talk with you about this here, because a Muslim's not supposed to be argumentative about it, you know. So, but I had to be a little bit more aggressive to find more answers that I needed. Then finally, without any warning whatsoever, I told her, I'm ready. I want to take Shahada. She said, what did you say? I said, I want to take Shahada. She said, well, okay. I said, can you set it up with the Imam at the Islamic Center of Washington, D.C., maybe for this weekend? She said, well, I'll try. So she called. And I don't know who she talked to, but they said, yeah, come on up. So we went on up there on a Saturday. And I didn't get a chance to see the Imam. He was not there. But whoever was the acting director, he sat down. We went to the library. And they have a vast library, they're a beautiful library. Even had part of the shroud that they used to cover the Kaaba with in there.
Right.
And
but how did you feel at that time going there to take Shahada? I mean, were you nervous, or were you confident that this is something you needed to do?
I was pretty confident. I actually felt good about it. In some ways, I was a little nervous because I was meeting people I'd never met before. And I reckon I was a little bit more introverted back then than I am now. I'm more of an outgoing person. I like to go out, shake people's hands, get to meet people now. But this brother sat down and talked to me about an hour about Islam before he gave the Shahada. And after the Shahada was given, my soon-to-be, future wife told me, she said that's the first time she's ever seen him do that, talk with somebody as long as he did. Usually it's like going to take Shahada, get out of there. But he took a lot of time with me, which was really interesting to her. She'd never seen that happen before. Anyway, soon afterwards, we got married, and of course we had a couple of children together.
Now, but just tell me, after you took Shahada, how did your family accept the fact that you had become Muslim?
At first, it wasn't any real big issue. My grandmother, who was the devout Catholic, had passed away a couple years prior, and that was one less mountain that I was going to have to scale. I realized at that point. My mother was slightly mentally challenged, so that really wasn't too big of an issue for her. Once in a while, she'd bring it up, but that was not really an issue. My father was not too much of an issue for him until a little later on, all of a sudden it kind of sank in what I had done. And then when my father's mother passed away, I think it was in 1995.
And when did you take Shahada? Which year?
1988.
88.
Make sure I'm telling you this right. I know it was the early 90s she passed away. And my father came up from Georgia, where he lives at, for the funeral here in Virginia. And he kind of like took me off to the side, away from everybody. And he said, you know what, this thing about your religion change, I don't like it. The family doesn't like it. And you were not raised this way. And I'm like, well, I said, Dad, you're right, I was not raised this way. I said, but maybe I think that this way is not the right way for me. And so, I did some study and I made a change. I said, just because, your father and his father before him practiced this way, doesn't mean that, that I have to. It doesn't mean that y'all are right. I said, I'm not telling y'all that y'all are wrong. I said, but just don't tell me that I'm wrong. And he had a real serious problem with that. And from then, there was like several years before he would,